It's kind of like a little. Yeah. Large science professor actually of large subjects.
Okay. Hello, here we go. Well, welcome all of you. So typically we have bigger crowds than this for this event, so I feel bad. Had a few things going on and I must not have got it out there early enough to get people, or I started promoting earlier, but then people kind of forget a little and I should have done some more reminders later on. So good thing is we do have live stream happening now. We weren't expecting it to be available. We were just going to Zoom it and record it, post it later, but it is live stream. So, and I do know of people that are jumping on to watch it now. So, oh, no, I just did it. Yeah, I did. I did. I got it. It's okay. So I guess I could have started out with this just because we always start with saying welcome everybody online and welcome everybody in person. My name is Krystal Hopper Meyers, if you don't know this already. I'm actually SWOCC's LIFT project administrator here now, but I'm still overseeing STEAM pathways. Soon you might see kind of a new face for our STEAM pathways, but I'll still be around. STEAM pathways is definitely something that is near and dear to my heart, so I don't see me ever not being around it. Working with the students and the researchers and K-12 community outreach is just so important, and it's really, it's an amazing job to be able to do. You know, I would just do it anyways as a volunteer if I didn't work a position. So with that said, our LIFT project that we have right now is actually connected to a grant that the college received. We're really grateful for. And we just announced our new diesel mechanic technology program. So if you are interested, we do have that available. Applications are live. Please help us spread the word. Today is probably, even though we have a small crowd here, it doesn't matter. It is the most, I think this is my most favorite event all year because we get to highlight all of the work that these students have done. A handful of them are here today. However, we do have some that are online that some of their work has been added to our slideshow. Students are going to come up, kind of just say a little bit about yourself, do your presentation, maybe tell us a little bit about your experiences, your major, pathway, anything you'd like. We have the very active K-12 community outreach planetarium work that we do. So maybe some things about that if you'd like. This year, with this event, we've definitely kind of kept it a little bit more comfortable. It's not so much of a real rigid professional setting, obviously. The students have done really good job this year with doing, some of them have actually been able to present in those more professional settings by traveling to like Oregon State University. Others had went to states like California and Washington being part of conferences, and those are a little bit different type of experience. But all this experience is always really great as the students go along their education and their journey here, but then if they choose to go on to university and then into their careers, they will have opportunities that they need to speak. This is a really great learning opportunity to speak in front of people. And when you're talking about research and other experiences that you've had, it looks great on the applications for college and and your resumes, of course, but it's just good lessons to learn. We actually have one of our students that's I know of, and maybe even some of them, the other ones might have past experiences or even current that I'm not even aware of. I don't know everything about them, but I try to learn. But they are with our speech and debate debate team with Marshfield. So I know they get opportunities with speaking, and that's a really important thing. I actually just noticed when I came in to this building that we have a new writers club here, which is awesome to see. We have film club, we have writers club, we have kind of a variety of different opportunities to get involved with a variety of different things. Of course, we have a very active athletics department. Some of our students that are within our SPEAR team is actually involved with some of the athletics, and starting with our first presenter. So I'll let him tell you a little bit about what he's got going on. Some of our students are also graduating this year, and so as much as we just like to keep them forever, we tell them that, it's just like we're always sad to see them go, but that's the whole point. And so I have to be like, okay, I guess you can go. But we're really fortunate to have students come back and visit us and do presentations to tell us about what they've got going on. So we do hope that some of those students, like Jack, will will come back and do presentations like we've had in the past. It's just really great to kind of hear of their journeys, where they're at. We have a cool Discord server online. That's the thing the kids use. How to learn it. But we have this Discord server. Sorry. It's at the end of the week. Come on. Discord server. And we keep in contact with all the students. It's a private server that's admin by some faculty members, myself. But we have alumni SPEAR members that are off at the universities. They're out in their career, and they actually stay on to help mentor some of these students, which is really great. See, you use those words, but I say I just keep in touch. I'll just like randomly show up in Corvallis. Hi. And they're like, oh my gosh, you're here. You're right, I am. So we definitely like to try to keep in touch. Oregon NASA Space Grant Consortium, who's actually housed over there at Oregon State, has been a huge, huge help with providing internship opportunities for these students, paid internship opportunities, which is huge, especially being out here on the coast. It's expensive, so it helps. But so we want to say thank you to them. We also want to say thank you to our Oregon Coast STEM Hub, who over this past year has helped us start a new program for high school STEM interns. And so this has allowed high school students, that's been a very popular program, to kind of get some of this experience at the high school level and get paid for it. So we're very, very much appreciated. STEM Hub is just doing all types of things around the state and everywhere. So thank you to them very much. We have an amazing foundation here at the college, our SWOCC Foundation, that has been always behind us and trying to help in so many ways of, finding ways to support all the work that we have going on here with STEAM Pathways. SPEAR is our STEAM Pathways Experimental and Academic Research team. However, it's made up of not only the students, but faculty, mentors, staff members. We've got an awesome lab coordinator who's not here today, but maybe online. Nick does a lot of help with things. So it's kind of just a team of a lot of different people making all this stuff going on. But we want to say thank you to the foundation. Recently, we were able to introduce some of the students to our awesome board. Our board here at SWOCC has always been really a big support to us. Tonight, we have Marcia here, our board president. Thank you so much. It means the world to us when people show up and show that they support and care. But we thank you all for all that you do every day in serving and helping our college and our community. Okay, so with that said, I want to get started. I'll say probably a couple more words a little bit later on, but I'd like to have you all listen to the students because that's what today is all about. This research symposium, did you want to say a few things first? Okay. Sure. So Dr. Coyner, our physics and engineering professor, is actually going to say a few words about kind of how things are laid out here. Dr. Coyner, along with Dr. Wynn McLaughlin, we've got professors Amy Burgess, Derek Morrelli here. These are just some amazing people that continue to help make all of this possible. So thank you for all of your help and work. So here you go.
All right, so as Krystal mentioned, we have a number of different projects. A lot of them will be are from different programs. The first few that you'll see are actually results from our faculty research award that was focused on Fossil Point and the various groups of researchers that we had working on different aspects of that project. We'll then have a presentation on the OSGC STAR program, on the astrobiological implications of brine shrimp, which I'm interested about. And then we'll have a kind of SWOCC in-house project after that on sort of continuum mechatronics stuff that our student Mason Miller and our electrical engineering faculty Frazier Pruett have been working on and kind of brainstorming about. And then our last three will be our STEM high school interns that were funded by Oregon Sea Grant and the Oregon Coast STEM Hub, working on various aspects of micrometeorites and king tide research and implications for coastal architecture. And so as we go, each one of our presenters will have about 5 to 7 minutes to talk, and then there's 2 or 3 minutes for questions as we go through. I do know we have had one instance where there have been some circumstances beyond our control, but I know Dr. McLaughlin will be stepping in for a minute to address that one when it comes up. But we will start with our first presenter, and I will hand over the microphone to Mr. Jack Davis.
Hi, everyone. My name's Jack Davis. I am a chemistry major here at SWOCC, and I'm on the soccer team. I did my research on monitoring the shoreline king tides. So, what are king tides? King tides are exceptionally high tides that happen in the winter months between November and February, the prominent months where they occur, and they happen during new or full moons. The definition I am looking at is a king tide is 3 standard deviations above the mean tide level for that given year. So ideas, we thought we could use pictures for visual aids at the start just to help, as this one is here, kind of working. We decided we can use data directly from the NOAA website, which is separated into CSV files, and it gave us tide level, air pressure, coastline shapes, coastline depth, and the arrival time of each of the tides. So here's the data for the amplitude of the waves in feet and the arrival time in minutes, which is very iffy to look at, but that's for a whole year. That's a year segment broken up into 6-minute intervals. Everything over 8.4 for this given time frame, which was between March 2023 and February 2024, was considered a king tide. That was the mean that we came out with, and that's how the math worked out. I don't question it. This is another chart we made. This one shows us on the purple lines, that's a high tide. On the green lines, that's a low tide. So the peaks and the troughs are alternating as you go along. This one was more just to see when the tides were occurring and how the waves were looking. This didn't really give us a look into it gave us a look into the height, but not good enough to use for future implications. Oh, is that all I had?
Yeah.
Is it? Nope. That's all I had. Oh. Okay. So going forward, I'm hoping to add more data sets. We have data back to 2016 right now. I want to get more involved and yeah. Any questions? Yes.
So anything above
Yes.
over just for that, or is it?
For that given year is what we're looking at. That given year, if it's over that, that's when we consider a king tide. Yes.
Does something like El Nino here then mess up with your data? Are you less likely to king tides if your average is maybe a wider range? Maybe El Nino year, I don't know.
It may. We don't really know for sure, but I feel like it's a standard spread usually, and based off the mean, that's where we go based off the standard deviations. That mean, if it's higher some years, it's good. That mean's gonna be higher, but then the king tides will still be just as high statistically or analytically from the mean. It'll all be in relative. Yes. It's just a data set that there was no data on in the past and there needed to be data on it. So I took the initiative and we started this project and got the data. That's all that it's just good to use for other projects like winds with the fossil point. It works really well with that since it shows us if it's a king tide bringing the stuff in or if it is tsunamis bringing the debris in from the ocean. Yes.
Level even or one outstrips the other and what that might mean for coastal erosion.
All right. Thank you everyone for your time.
Okay, thank you. And next up is going to be Sam. Sam's actually going to come up here and present. We only have one microphone up here, so I just was reminded that if you have questions, I could run you the microphone so that everybody online will be able to hear what you're actually asking and they're answering. So here we go.
Thank you. Alrighty, so my name is Samantha Hayes, and I worked on the faculty research board project with one of my classmates, Sabrina Pingree, and we worked in the chemistry side of things. We were specifically looking at lipids that get leached into the sedimentary rock surrounding fossils and how to extract them and identify them for future study. So we're talking about lipid leaching and how that happens during fossil formation. Talked about this a lot with Dr. Wynne McLaughlin, our SWOCC geologist. She explained a good portion of it to us. And so lipids leach into the sediment during fossilization, and they last a really long time, and they cause this darker halo around the outside, which we've coined the biological halo. And these stick around longer than any other biological molecule because they are hydrophobic, so they're not washed away by water or anything like that. And they also have these really long carbon tails, as you can see there. So just the mere size of them makes them last longer. It takes longer to break them down than any other ones. And so once we identify these can give us insights into the ancient lifestyles, what they were eating, what kind of environment that they were living in. And so that's all great and lovely to know, but now we have to figure out how to do it. How are we going to extract them? How are we going to identify them? And so these are our examples here. Kind of hard to see on the projector, but there is a darker area here that's an example of that biological halo. And then this was our original fossil sample that we were going to use. And it hard to see up there, but it had a really distinct dark line right on the edge of the bone sample. And so that was exactly what we were looking for. All right, so this is our literature research section. This is like our movie montage before our heist. So throughout all of the research that we read, there was two really common methods that were used for the lipid extraction process, and that was the SWOCC and the saponification method. These were from research articles from the 70s all the way to today. So we knew that they were tried and true. They had been tested over and over again and showed really good results. So we decided to go with these two methods, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. And then for identification methods, once we actually get the lipids extracted, we had NMR and gas chromatography, which were used in pretty much everything that we read. And luckily, we have both of those machines on campus to use. Wrong way. There we go. So on our experimental setup, so for the SWOCC extraction, we needed a specialized siphon glassware, which we had on campus. And so that allows the solvent that we were going to use to be redistilled. And then, so it'll drip down onto our sample. And then once it gets up to a certain level, it'll trigger the siphon, pour back down into the round bottom flask, be reheated and redistilled. So you can set it and forget it and just let it run for a long time and get a really high yield extraction that way. And then after that, to further purify it, we would use saponification, which is like simple soap making. We would add a really strong base and help detach it from that glycerol head to the fatty acid tails. And we would use the fatty acid tails for our identification process. And then I've got some pictures. So this is kind of a diagram of a setup. We've got that flask at the bottom, and that's heated, and then it goes up on this outer one, and it's the condenser, drip, drip, drip. And then once that gets high enough and everything's extracted, it'll trigger the siphon, go back down, do everything again. This was our first iteration of the setup. Really, really tall. Did not want to knock it over. Had to be very cautious with it. We were able to actually get it down a little shorter. This is what we have in the fume hood currently, and it fits in the fume hood now. And so that's how we've got it set up currently. And then this is for the saponification. This is just kind of what happens during the process. We won't be using sodium hydroxide, we'll be using potassium hydroxide. But as you can see here, the way that it interacts with the molecule is it lets us separate the glycerol head from the fatty acid chains there. And then let's talk about some hiccups that we have, because there has been a few, but that is part of the scientific process. So our first major one was that first rock sample that I showed you guys. We split it open and there was a very, very beautifully preserved leaf in there. And so we didn't want to destroy it. So we saved it. Luckily, Wynn had plenty of other samples for us to use. And so we were able to get some really good samples and get them ground up. And you see that really murky water there? We ground it up way too fine, and it made a suspension of particles when we were trying to extract it. And we don't want that to happen, because if the actual raw material goes over the edge of our little container and gets mixed in with our solvent and what we're trying to extract, that is not great. We only want the solvent and the lipids that we're hopefully extracting to be in with that. And then in our actual setup, our little thimble there that we had our samples in, it wasn't tall enough and it wouldn't trigger the siphon. Luckily, we have another one on order so that we can get everything working properly and get a less finely ground sample in there so that it will flow in the rate that we need it to. So I feel like it has made us better scientists so far to go through all of these trials and errors, and I'm sure that there will be more to come, but I know we know how to handle them. And then a special thanks to our chemistry professor, Derek Morrelli, and Dr. Wynn McLaughlin. They really, really helped me and Sabrina through this project and gave us a lot of insights into how to continue on. Any questions? Yeah. Yes. Oh.
What's your favorite experience so far here at SWOCC with the SPEAR team, and a little bit about what you plan on your pathway from here?
I think my favorite experience is when we went to OSU. This project just had a poster, but there was a presentation encompassing everything. And it was really fun to be part of that team and get to travel with everyone and play heads up in the van. That was really fun. And then moving forward, I'll be going to Oregon State University in the fall for finishing up my bachelor's in biochemistry, and then continuing on to be a genetic counselor is the end goal. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Okay. If you have any questions, just please feel free to raise your hand and I'll try to get the.
If you want to be part of this project specifically, you can talk to me or Derek or Sabrina if you see her. And if you want to be part of any other projects, you can talk to Derek or Wynn or Krystal. Okay.
Really, any of us. Just say you want to be a part of it and we'll. Yes, we have Sabrina wasn't able to be here today, but Sabrina and Sam is part of the chemistry club. We have these kind of other exciting things. We have a geology club outside of SPEAR that kind of work on specific, like geology specific, obviously, and it's pretty awesome. So let's see here. Who would be our next one? Do we have going on? All right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Dr. Wynn McLaughlin's actually going to help us out with the next one because our students were not able to be here tonight.
Okay, so Vincent and Stephanie can't be here, so I am presenting their poster. That they presented this poster at the Geological Society of America section meeting in Sacramento. We had several other students, Gabbard and Jack, also attend. This was a national conference that had people from all over, especially the West Coast, but we did have a few from further afield presenting on very, very broadly different geology topics. And they presented this really cool combined poster. Stephanie's project was trying to integrate structural geology, so how do we fold and fault and break apart rocks, with marine biology. So me, not really knowing anything about the still living squishy creatures, noticed that a lot of the little sea anemones often live along the cracks and faults that we see out at Fossil Point. And what Stephanie found looking at aerial photography was that sometimes when we can't see the rocks, you can actually use where different invertebrates are to tell what the rocks are underneath the sand, which is pretty cool because we're trying to get a better picture of broadly how tectonically active is Coos Bay and what kind of processes have shaped and formed it over time. Vincent was working on primarily the Coos conglomerate. So this is one of our groups of rocks that's found at Fossil Point. And historically, it had been lumped in with our main body of rock out there, the Empire Formation. The Empire Formation, that's the one that we have nice fatty whales sitting in, possibly fatting out into the sediments around them. It's like a lagoon. It's very quiet. It's not got a lot going on in it. Fine grained sand is your biggest sediment size you have there. Whereas in the Coos conglomerate, there's a whole lot of rock chunks. Some of them get up to the size that you can have a whole whale skull in. So very, very large chunks of rock. And how do you have enough energy to move 2-meter long boulders? Well, one of the few ways you can do that is tsunamis. So one of the things that Vincent is in the middle of working on is all of these pictures with these little grids applied over the top. Vincent is going through and measuring the size of all of these different clasts to see how big they are, kind of calculate how much energy would be needed to move them, but also if they line up in a particular direction. So if you have something like a king tide, your main energy is when your wave comes into shore. So your rocks are pushed sort of facing into shore. Whereas if you have a tsunami, it sort of runs onto shore, pauses, and then really erodes when it goes back out to the ocean. So you tend to get rocks that point back out to the ocean. And the preliminary results are Yes, the rocks point back out to the ocean. It's kind of cool, fairly simple science, but it's something that nobody's ever done before. So this will change the published age of the Coos conglomerate by about 19 million years, which is fairly significant when we're trying to look at things like earthquake hazard in changing environments on the Oregon coast. And both of them are going to continue on working on this project over the next year. Stephanie plans to try and bring in some of the chemistry aspect, because Derek keeps stealing my students. What can I say? Using our really cool new machine. If you're still going to be around, we just got an XRF. Stephanie is very interested in kind of seeing if there's maybe even geochemical signals of, depending on the type of rock that invertebrates are living on, does that impact their chemistry? So if you have sea anemones living on the Coos conglomerate compared to the Empire Formation, are they chemically the same? And Vincent is going to measure the direction of a whole lot more rocks and learn how to use some really janky geology programs that make that into semi-pretty plots. So these are both continuing projects, but kind of our big takeaway is that we have this really incredible fossil site that also records changing elevation of the coastline, seismic hazard, changing environments. We've known about it since at least this map here was published in 1865. It says Fossil Point on it. Presumably that means people found fossils there. We've known about this for a really long time, and yet there are 2 publications that mention anything about Fossil Point, and both of them think that the Coos conglomerate is 20 million years old and not 1 million years old, which is a bit of a difference. Ta-da! Yay!
Is the a tectonic activity?
It's a messy, complicated answer. The short version is there's a lot of faults that are more active than we previously thought. The slightly longer answer is that's actually a good thing, because we like little tiny faults doing little tiny movements, because that's taking stress and force away from things like a Cascadia megathrust earthquake. So one of the problems with our seismic forecasting for what's the seismic hazard of this broad area is basically from Florence south has been treated all the way to the California border, has been treated as one giant block, and how that behaves. And that doesn't remotely reflect the actual geology, where we have lots of little tiny pieces that are going up and down and rotating, folding and moving around. And that can take a lot of the force. It potentially has implications for very narrow specific areas. So part of the Fossil Point research is building in on some larger projects that have been going on with a research group called Crescent that studies Cascadia megathrust earthquake hazard. And one of the faults that has been found to be a lot more active than people thought is the Charleston fault, which goes right along the edge of Charleston. So there's a poster out in the hallway that barely mentions this, but one of our former SWOCC students who graduated last year is working on that at University of Oregon. And so what she's doing is going to the geologic benchmarks, the like cool little brass circles that are hammered into various places, and taking really, really accurate GPS measurements at what their elevation is. And our coastline here in Coos Bay is uplifting at the scale of millimeters a year, which is a lot. There's, again, pros and cons to that. It means that most of our area will likely not be significantly impacted by rising ocean levels because our land is rising higher. It makes it really complicated to estimate what could happen in the event of a Cascadia megathrust earthquake when some of that buildup drops back down, but not all the way back down.
We do have a few posters on display out here if you have a chance to kind of take a look at them. I wanted to also mention when Dr. Coyner had talked about the Oregon Coast STEM Hub, the Oregon Community Foundation was actually the one who helps with the specific program for the high school STEM internship. So we always want to say thank you to them for their help. All right. Well, Dr. Coyner is helping us with watching. Is there any questions online from? Okay. All right. So for our next set, I believe we have our high school interns. Oh, we got. Okay. Gabbard. I'm sorry, Gabbard. I didn't mean to jump over you. Sorry. They want to go last. They're giving me that look like. Yeah. Yes. So here is the awesome Gabbard.
Hello. I am Gabbard Herring. I worked on, any questions? Oh, I'm going the wrong way. That's what it is. Okay. Okay. There we go. Okay. I'm Gabbard Herring. I'm a physics major, and I'll be talking about the STAR project I worked on today. Brine shrimp reproduction, a glimpse into otherworldly life. So in the search for life outside our Earth, NASA has followed the mantra, follow the water. This is because when life was developing on our Earth, we needed water to develop. So magnetometer readings provided strong evidence for an ocean 25 times the average depth and 2 times the volume of Earth's on Europa. This was in about 2000 that we received this semi-concrete proof of this. An induced magnetic field indicated a minimum salinity of that water of 30 grams per liter. That's about the salinity of our own ocean. So to have a minimum means that these creatures that we have no evidence are living on there, but let's say hypothetically they were, would have to be able to survive osmotic dehydration or conditions that would induce osmotic dehydration. So how could life have persisted in such a high salinity? Well, to figure out the answer to this question, it's important to turn our eyes to life on Earth. There are environments on Earth that are much saltier than the ocean. We have a hypersaline lake in Oregon, Lake Egbert. The main occupant of that lake is the Artemia, or brine shrimp. Brine shrimp are a genus of fairy shrimp with a very long history of commercial sale. You may have heard of them as sea monkeys, sold as children's toys in the 90s. Or, if you're an aquaculturist, you may have heard of them as fish food. They are uniquely suited for briny waters, present in levels from 30 grams per liter, that of our ocean, to 330 grams per liter. Their osmoregulation system is off the charts. It is way amazing. 674 genes were expressed differently under high salinity than low salinity. And they're found in hypersaline lakes across every continent except for Antarctica. They're extremely resilient. But to be resilient, they needed to adapt to very specific conditions. So how did they get this way? How did they survive for so long? Well, they have funky reproduction. This is what we're here about, brine shrimp reproductive habits. These are little baby brine shrimp hatching out of their eggs. And here's the lowdown on Artemia reproduction, right? Okay. They can reproduce asexually or sexually. Brine shrimp, when they reproduce asexually, actually reproduce with diploid. So a single female can create male offspring with no male involved in the reproduction. This is great. This provides them a lot of benefit. However, not really beneficial for salinity. Asexuals live shorter lives above and below 60 grams per liter of salinity, so extremely high and extremely low salinity can be fatal. They also have lower levels of oviparous reproduction, which oviparous and oviviparous reproduction are very important parts of the brine shrimp resistance. Oviviparity is, or ovoviviparity, is when the egg hatches inside the mother and then is released as live napoli. Oviparity is when it's lain as an egg. When it's lain as an egg, it's lain in something called diapause. Oh, at 30 grams per liter, reproduction was entirely oviviparous. So at the lowest salinity, they're releasing these live offspring. This steadily increases, the oviparous reproduction steadily increased as salinity increased and then was entirely oviparous at 80 grams per liter. This is because they're released in something called diapause. But what's so cool about diapause? I'm so glad I asked. Diapause, it makes the cyst extremely resistant. The cyst is the egg. 15% of the dry weight of the cyst is trehalose. That's what protects your yeast, your common pantry yeast, from dehydration, what allows it to reawake and make your bread light and fluffy. It also prevents damage from dehydration in these brine shrimp. These brine shrimp are ametabolic, and they are not alive. They are not dead, but they aren't developing, and they can be dehydrated from 3 months to 18 years. You can chuck these guys in storage, drop them in the right conditions, and they'll hatch again. Well, kind of. The right conditions aren't exactly the optimal conditions. To hatch, first you need an activation queue. This activation queue is actually a negative condition. You need to put these dry eggs in extreme salinity, extreme heat, extreme radiation, something that would not be a good environment for life. And then you need to put them in optimal conditions. Then they wake up. And there's a lot of very interesting chemistry that goes into it, and a lot of very interesting implications for cancer research. The same protein that allows them to wake up after all of this time is what allows metastatic breast cancer to wake up in the body. But I can't really get into that now. I have 7 minutes. So I'll ask if you have any questions. Oh, and here are my sources.
Anyone out there with questions? Any online? Okay, hold on a second.
So as wide-reaching as that was, what was the most interesting piece of information you found in your?
Because this essay was written for the STAR Award, it had to tie into space science, which I have no problem with at all. But that also meant I couldn't include that part about the SETD4, that protein, and its implications for cancer research. Essentially, the base is, if you can take the Artemia's SETD4 and find out a way to never turn it on, to break that mechanism, then you can find a way to never turn on metastatic cancer. You can stop it from metastasizing, which for metastatic breast cancer is very important because metastatic breast cancer is incurable. It's fatal. So that was the most interesting to me, but I couldn't really get into it in the essay.
Astronauts sort of space explorations. You might have been able to spin it that way, but I know that wasn't how we originally.
Then it might have been a much longer essay. Yes. Oh my gosh.
So what made you choose brine shrimp to research about?
This is such a fun story. I was in my senior year of high school. I was applying to college, and one of the application questions was choose a title from a song, title or lyric, and answer it. Choose a question. And I chose Is There Life on Mars from Life on Mars by David Bowie, which is not what that song's about. And I wrote this whole very fantastical, wordy essay about, our persistence in the search for life not on Earth. And as a joke, I said, we have these saline creatures. We have creatures that can live in environments that might be on Mars. What if we had a Martian brine shrimp? And that's how I arrived here. And European brine shrimp also has a nice ring to it, I think. Any more questions?
Thank you again. Some of these students just amaze me, all of them, when they come up here. They're just so smart and they're so passionate about what they talk about. And I just like that proud moment. I'm like always taking pictures. I'm just like, oh my gosh, they're so great. But they really are. And I liked when you listen to that presentation with Gabbard, it shows you how all of these different things tie together that can then potentially help somebody who is working on cancer research, which is something that impacts many of us probably in this room too in some way, if you've known somebody. So thank you for that. The STAR Award is actually, we have 3 recipients, Riley, Jill, Gabbard. Those are given out by Oregon NASA Space Grant. And so we just really appreciate, Riley wasn't able to be here, but their research was focused on psychology and astronauts. And she was actually working with Cheryl, which is our professor here with psychology. I'd mentioned earlier that we have some of the professors here. We want to say thank you to also some of them who may not be here that's helping mentor some of them. Professor Andrea Knudsen is going to help us out this fall with mentoring a student who's interested in biology A&P, doing some journal type review. So all right. So with that said, we have our next presenter, Mason. You ready? Okay. Mason was actually mentored by Professor Frazier Pruett, who is a local electrical engineer. He's got his lab over there in the Hall building in Coos Bay. Also works here part-time, helping us teach students. So here you go.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Mason. I'm an engineering student here at SWOCC. I've been working on a project, like she said, with Frazier. We've been working on continuum robotics. So it's going to be kind of short. We've only kind of started this, so I'm just going to give, oops, it is the wrong way. It's going to get everybody. I'm just going to kind of go over the basics of what we're studying and what we're trying to do with this project. So the basic difference between conventional robotics and continuum robotics is with conventional robotics, you have rigid pieces with fixed joints in between, and that's how you locomote the robot, back and forth, kind of like our arms. And with continuum robotics, you have a single flexible piece throughout the entire length of the robot. Ooh, it's loud. And then you use something like tendons or motors to actuate it back and forth, if you can imagine, sort of like a spine of a snake, if you can imagine. Oh my goodness. And this is a better representation of what that looks like. You have less advanced robotics, which it just has a few segments, and then more advanced robotics. And this is kind of where most robotics are, is this serpentine style where it's very fluid, but it's not continuous. With continuous robotics, you have a single flexible element within the robot that allows it to be very, very fluid. It can do a lot of things that normal robotics can't. Wow, I'm tired. The way you can actuate it is with a single tendon that runs the length of the robot. And when you pull this tendon downward, it'll curve the robot in that direction. That's the primary way to get it to move. Alternative ways is if you take your tendon, if you were to wrap it in a spiral all the way to the top, you can get it to curl up, sort of like if you've ever seen like an earthworm get scared. It sort of curls up like that. Wow. Got to be patient with me. And lastly, this is kind of the current design for what we're trying to build. We don't have any physical prototypes yet. This is just a 3D model. But when you use a set of cables to actuate it, you only have one set of cables per curve, if you can imagine. So if you curve in one way, that requires one set of cables. But if you want it to curve a second direction, like if you want to make an S shape, you need a second set of cables. And those are attached to the terminal end. So we have 2 terminal ends. That's what we'd like to build so we can get 2 curves out of it. It's a lot more complex. We'll have a sort of motor assembly down in the bottom, and then tendons, where you're thinking about using high tensile fishing line as tendons up the length of the robot, and then some sort of flexible PVC is the core. And I think that's it.
All right, I have fun with this one because of all the flexibility, because I can imagine applying it to various things and making a lot of projects. But where do you see some of the more more likely applications for this sort of evolution of robotics technology?
Yeah, so one of the reasons I chose this is there's not a lot of application right now for this kind of technology, and they're not quite as widespread, but there are a few good uses that they're not really being applied in right now. The first of those is medical technology. When you have a very fluid, flexible robot that can apply a very soft force, because again, it's flexible on the inside, it's not a rigid thing. That's really useful for surgery. Like if you were to say, I don't know, if you wanted to do some sort of heart surgery up inside someone, you could make a very small incision and that robot could travel upward in the human body in a way that a rigid robot really couldn't. Other uses could be for things like manufacturing or repair, say for aerospace manufacturing, where you have really complex fuselage, I don't think I'm saying that right, on airplanes, and say you get some sort of damage on the inside. Instead of taking that whole thing apart, you can now insert a robot that can find its way up inside the fuselage and make any sort of repair. There are a couple others I'm sure I'm not thinking of right now.
Another question back here. Do we have any online? Okay.
So you mentioned having a tendon required for each curvature. Do you see like a possible, at least for your project currently, a possible maximum number of tendons you'd be able to get up to? Yeah. Do you think that at this stage there might be a limit to how many tendons you could use, basically limiting or kind of dictating how many different types of curvature you can impart?
So as far as limiting factors, I think you're referring to just like how many individual curves we can get out of it. It's really going to come down to weight of the thing, which is we can get it pretty light because there's not really any sort of physical components along the length of it. I'd say the main one would just be weight. Because the longer you have this thing sticking out here, you know, because you're only using tension to hold this thing aloft, you're using just tension. Say you're holding this thing out at like 90 degrees, like straight out. It's really difficult to use just tension to hold that aloft. I guess too, your inner core for what you're using. So like, for example, we'd like to use PVC pipe, a sort of flexible PVC hosing. If you rotate that, or not rotate it, if you bend it too much, it'll kink and it'll snap and it'll break. So the material you're using on the inside is going to limit that a lot. So if you're using something like silicone tubing, really, really flexible, you can get a lot of curves in that, but then it's not structurally supportive and you can't reach a long distance. So you kind of got to find a balance with that, which we've been kind of looking for. We're still experimenting. Any other question? Thank you.
All right. Laura, you're next.
All right. So I am Laura Werlis. I am a high school junior at North Bend High School, and I looked at the effect of micrometeorites on plant growth. Micrometeorites are these small little particles of space rock that come from all over the solar system. And they're composed of different elements like iron, silicate, carbon, magnesium, and a whole bunch of different stuff. And that depends on kind of where it comes from in the solar system. We will learn a bit more about micrometeorites later on, but they fall on Earth constantly. And according to On the Trail of Stardust, it falls at a rate of approximately 1 micrometeorite per square meter per day. That's a lot of micrometeorites. Like, they're falling out there right now, and you can't even see them because they're so itty bitty. But this is very important because the Earth is billions of years old. So as they have been kind of compiling up, there's a lot of plants growing since that point. So looking at the effect of micrometeorites on those plants is what I decided to look into. So we're not able to just compile a whole bunch of micrometeorites. It's a little hard to find them. So instead, I recreated micrometeorites by mixing iron oxide and olivine. I actually had to get iron oxide from iron-rich sand that Wynn had. It was really fun actually, but I put that on Wisconsin fast plants. They grow in approximately a month, so it's really nice to just use that when you have a 10-week period for your high school internship. But I did different groups depending on the year. So I did a 1,000-year group where it got enough micrometeorites that fall within 1,000 years, and then a 10,000-year group and a 100,000-year group. And I kind of looked at the different just effects, seeing how if there was more significance on one or the other. And this is kind of what it looks like. There was just a whole bunch of different rows. There was a control group that didn't get any micrometeorites, so that was really nice. But we put them in this little grow tent that always had light on it, and it was really good for the plants. But statistical tests showed that there was no effect from micrometeorites. That's probably the amount of the mixture. Since micrometeorites are so small, there's not a lot of that goes even in 10,000 years of it. So there wasn't a lot of the nutrients like iron or magnesium going onto it. But qualitatively, the plants seemed to appear healthier with more micrometeorites on it. So they were taller, they were greener. But it's inconclusive if micrometeorites were the cause. There was a lot of problems that happened in this experiment. Quite a few of my plants died because I wasn't giving them enough water. That was my fault. But so I wanted to look into this more by looking at the local effects. So we have a lot of local wildlife here, like huckleberries and salal. We have the bleeding heart, Douglas fir, just to name a few. But looking more into how micrometeorites affect our local area is really interesting. To fix some of the mistakes I made prior, it would probably be a little bit more years, so 100,000 years plus, to see if it was just the amount of micrometeorites that was affecting it. And then obviously take qualitative observations. That was a little bit of a mistake on my part, but that will let me know if it's actually
helping the plants or not. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions here?
All right. So I know you mentioned the potential for plants in the area. I guess if you extended this study, which species would you probably start with in terms of in terms of what's next on?
I was thinking probably Salau. It's a nice species. It's pretty hardy, and you see it everywhere when you go out. It's like very present in the local area. So I was thinking it would be a good way to know how it affects just the entire community around, not just like one plant, because Salau does affect other plants around the area as well.
Any more questions here? Oh, hold on, Sam.
Have you thought about looking into how these different environmental conditions not only affect the growth rate, but also the chemical makeup of the plants? I feel like that would be interesting to see, because they've got these different chemical environments in them.
I think that would be pretty interesting, actually. I hadn't thought of it before because there's only so much time you have in the day, but I think that would be really interesting if given like the opportunity to do that. I would love to look more into that. Yeah.
I wonder if that could be like tied to the XRF. Is that something that potentially we have our new awesome XRF here? Well, thank you, Laura, very much. We actually met Laura. I can't remember exactly was the first one, but we've had STEAM academies, STEAM for teens, STEAM for kids, all types of events like that over these years recently, and picking up amazing students like that is what happens, and it's really cool. Okay, so here we go. Marigold, ready? Okay, Laura spoiled micrometeorites a little bit, so I'm gonna need you all to forget everything that you heard. I'm sorry. Hold on. Okay, well, is it backwards? Up? Technical help, please? I love you so much, Krystal. I hope you know that. Yay, thank you so much. Okay. So, meteor showers, we're familiar with them. They're breathtaking celestial phenomenons to witness. They can typically be seen a few times at various locations every year all over the world as our Earth and its solar system races through the universe. Most of us are familiar with meteorites, the rare and exceptionally expensive rocks from space that manage to enter Earth's atmosphere and survive the trip. But what if I told you that there was a lesser known kin to the meteorite that landed on Earth far more frequently, up to 100 metric tons per day for a grand total of 30,000 tons per year? Let me introduce you to the microscopic champion of cosmic spherules, the stardust that rains down on us every day, no matter the weather, the micrometeorite. Furthering our knowledge about micrometeorites is the aim of our very own Project Starfall, just one of many ongoing research projects here at SWOCC. These are micrometeorites. They can vary widely in shape, size, color, and composition. The reason why you haven't felt one land on your head before is simply because of how small they are. It's in the name. This is a micrometeorite on a fingertip. The size of an average micrometeorite is about 280 microns large, which, to put into perspective, is equal to the thickness of cardstock paper, or about 20 times smaller than the thickness of pencil lead. So, what is a micrometeorite? What makes them special? Like their distant kin, the meteorite, they're pieces that come off of astral bodies like meteors, asteroids, or even moons, which does include our moon. In space, they travel up to 160,000 miles per hour and burn through Earth's atmosphere at speeds as fast as 50 times that of a rifle bullet. Their speedy descent down to Earth causes them to melt, in a process also known as frictional heating. And their one-of-a-kind appearances are based on not only how fast they fall, but how they rotate and what angle they fall at. Based on how they form from these factors, there are 4 main categories that micrometeorites can fall into: scoriaceous, barred, and porphyritic olivine, cryptocrystalline, and glass. Scoriaceous micrometeorites are particles that did not reach temperatures higher than 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Their highly vesicular shape is due to the volatile elements that expand and escape as gas bubbles during their descent, which creates those interesting miniature craters, and it is why they are coined the term scoriaceous. Nonetheless, inside these particles, they contain unmelted relic grains from the rock that they come from. Unlike more common micrometeorites, this type does not nearly have as aerodynamic of a form as the rest of them. Like terrestrial particles that come from volcanoes, they have a low density, so some of them can float. Also, this is scoriaceous. I accidentally pressed the other one. Next, porphyritic olivine micrometeorites. They were exposed to slightly higher peak temperatures. They look significantly more diverse. This is because they are made up of large olivine or forsterite crystals. Morphologically, the formations of their crystals can range from small and evenly distributed to few of varying sizes, or rarely one singular crystal. Like scoriaceous micrometeorites, it is typically has a vesicular form with the potential addition of a metal bead of nickel or iron on its surface. Barred olivines are the most common type of micrometeorite, and they went through temperatures even hotter than their porphyritic sibling. During its process, a barred olivine will fully melt before large crystal grains of magnetite and olivine form as it cools, causing a pattern called Christmas trees on its coarse-grained surface. The metal bead can have I don't know why I wrote that. Anyway, the metal bead can be from the spherul's nucleus when it recrystallizes while being affected by the aerodynamic forces of flight through the atmosphere. Cryptocrystalline micrometeorites are mainly made up of glass and tiny crystallites. Because of their exposure to peak temperatures even higher than those of the olivine micrometeorites, its form is much more visibly aerodynamic. It may be longer and more oval-shaped, with one or more metal beads on its surface, depending on the centrifugal force and how it spun as it descended. It is possible for them to lose metal beads as well, creating an empty hole in its form. Cryptocrystalline types can take a unique shape known as a turtleback, due to a shape resembling a turtle shell forming around the spherule. Lastly, with its peak temperature reaching 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit, the glass-type micrometeorite is exposed to the most scorching atmospheric deceleration. Also known as vitreous or V-type micrometeorite, most, if not all, of its nickel and iron content has evaporated during that process. It can have remains of burst glass bubble in it, or sometimes it can have a metal bead on the surface like the other micrometeorites. But it is what remains of its differentiated metal core that was pushed to the surface by inertia and surface tension. The glass type can appear in the widest variety of colors of all the micrometeorites, from transparent to green and brown hues to a rare blue. Now that you're thoroughly excited to start your collection of microscopic extraterrestrial rocks, you probably want to know how you can start finding them in the first place, since they're so incredibly tiny. The first micrometeorites were found deep in the ocean during 4-year Challenger expedition in 1876. Since we live in a city where no one is particularly excited to jump into the ocean, the easiest place to start looking is actually a roof. After the Industrial Revolution, the amount of microscopic man-made spherules littering our cities has skyrocketed, and those particles make it much more difficult to find micrometeorites. Ideally, you want to search somewhere old, flat, and undisturbed with low wind and low human activity. Micrometeorite collectors often use different methods involving magnets to quickly sort through dust and debris. Common micrometeorites tend to be magnetic due to their magnetite content, or a metal bead on their surface. They may be small, but they are hardy. It can take 50 years for a micrometeorite to show any signs of weathering after they land on Earth. After much cleaning, sifting, and sorting of samples, they can be studied properly under the microscope. These are some of the potential candidates I found during my internship in Project Starfall. Even under a microscope, it can be extremely hard to tell the difference between a micrometeorite and something that isn't. Luckily, a recent addition to our college can help with that, the XRF, or X-ray fluorescence machine. It can decipher what the potential spherules of stardust are made of, and whether or not any of my samples are legitimately extraterrestrial. So that's all pretty interesting, but what makes Project Starfall so special? Well, for how vast the universe is and the staggering amount of astral bodies we've discovered, just imagine how many more microscopic specks of cosmic dust there are floating around in the universe. Micrometeorites can potentially hold evidence from astrophysical events, and they can be found fossilized in sedimentary rocks. This realization that micrometeorites could act as records for these events supported the research and eventual discovery of the Ordovician breakup event, which happened 467 million years ago. That is the asteroid collision that has caused most of the meteorite impacts on Earth while humans have inhabited it. In general, possibly any and every solar system event has been captured in these these shards of stardust. Right now, micrometeorites as a subject are very under-researched and a relatively new subject, despite their sheer potential for even more scientific and historical breakthroughs. During my time in Project Starfall, I not only discovered so many ways micrometeorites can be utilized to learn about our universe, but in a more abstract way, I also learned that sometimes the most phenomenal, captivating discoveries can easily go unknown. The dust from the creation of our universe might be underneath our very feet waiting to be explored. We just have to look down from time to time. Thank you. Any questions?
So you mentioned that there have been some very promising possible micrometeorites. What type are they looking like? The olivine, the cryptocrystalline, and I probably pronounced that wrong, but you get it.
Okay. For clarification, you want to know like the types of micrometeorites that can lead back to those events that I found. Oh, most likely the ones that were under the microscope were probably barred olivine because they are very aerodynamic, as in they are very round, and they have those little rings of magnetite around them, which makes them very magnetic. So, but I have found one glass one, and then I lost it in the petri dish, and I couldn't find it again. So that was very sad. It had a metal bead too. It was really cool. Okay.
I won't steal his question this time. I'll actually ask it for him. But one of our former students, Jake Bullard, who was part of one of the original incarnations of Spear, he's now a senior at OSU. I think he's trying to triple major in things, but but I forget. But he did have a question about what was there anything unexpected you came across during your research? I know you kind of came in, you got co-opted into micrometeorite stuff, and then I had a question on my side, which will be kind of a second question. Is talk to us a little bit about your future plans and the research that you want to do going forward.
Okay, for the question online, the most interesting thing I came across looking under a microscope was this microscopic seed that looked like an almond, but I kept looking in between the microscope and taking my eye off of it and being like, that's not an almond, it's microscopic. I don't know what it is. And I took a picture of it. It's not in the slide, obviously, but it was very funny, very strange. I don't know, I just forget how small other things are besides just gravel, which was most of what I saw in the petri dish. And for my personal research, micrometeorites are not what I'm going into. I'm so sorry. I love geology. I am interested in neuroscience and brain science and helping people with that. I want to contribute to all of the mysteries I want to help solve all of the mysteries that we have found about the brain, answers that have gone unanswered throughout time. I want to get down to the very basics of our massive control system computer in our heads. I think it's the coolest thing ever, and I love to pursue that. So, thank you. Thank you, Marigold. I have no doubt that you will do well with where you're going. You're so bright. And again, another student that we had met in one of our, I think, K-12 events originally. And with all these students, they come from different areas. We have students that were homeschooled, they attended private schools, online public schools, and some of them maybe even took a different route, decide they're going to go GED route that works better for them. And we have, it's really awesome to see some of these students like Marigold taking on a project like this, but yet completely different of what you're actually going to do. You're gaining a lot of experience though, and I know it, and I know that you know it too, so it's neat. On some of these projects, with a lot of them, especially with Space Grant, the students actually become published authors, so that is a big deal too. So, okay, we have one more presenter for you tonight. We have Rin.
I have a little board. I highly doubt any of you can really see the drawing, especially from the back. So I'm very sorry because I kind of made this before I came here. However, I have no idea how to work this. Oh, that's the wrong way. So mine's a little different than everyone else's. Kind of strange. However, I am currently a high school student at Marshfield. I'm the person who she mentioned in the beginning of being the speech and debate kid. So I have some experience in talking in front of others. Doesn't mean I'm not nervous and does not mean I probably won't puke later because of this. But throughout this entire project, it was pretty interesting. I'm somebody who's currently working on their associates in engineering, and I'm eventually going to go into architecture major to become an architect, specifically, hopefully, engineering architect. I'm also going to get my architectural technical associates after I graduate high school. I'm an upcoming senior, so I'm a junior this year. When I joined this project, I had no idea what was going on. I kind of just got told by a friend that there was an internship I can get paid for. And I went to the meeting. They told me about king tides, but I wanted to talk about architecture. And one of the things that we got was to talk about architecture and how we can improve it from all the damage tides bring all our buildings, especially because most of our buildings are on the coast. There are so much water damage, and there are so many improvements that we can make. So Jack in the beginning kind of told you guys what a tide was, so I won't really go over that about that because nobody really cares about that. However, basics, tides kind of influence about the lunar cycle, and important, blah, 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 nobody really cares. But this entire project of the thing, I wasn't really focused on any of the things. Everyone else was. There was a lot of complications when I was doing the whole research part because everything was going wrong. However, since January researching this, I realized in architecture, there's a lot of things that we do that works really well, and a lot of things that we do that makes no sense. One of the things that we do is we have floating pillars. If you are kind of into soil and stuff like that, you know that that stuff moves around and that it erodes. And on the coast, it erodes a lot faster because of the water. And when you're in Oregon, it rains constantly, nonstop. That's all it does. So on coastal lines, it gets so much more worse. So floating pillars, That's a horrible idea. But for some reason, more than half of our buildings in the coastal area, especially on the pier for some reason, all have floating pillars. Do I know why? No. Was it a good idea? No. That's why they're all being destroyed and why we're constantly having to do remodeling, rebuilding, demolishing the buildings to build them back up again and do that over again because for some God reason, they keep doing the same thing. However, there is a process where we use pipes. Specifically, no, we can't hit the middle of the earth so we can get the pipes fully ready, but we can hit solid ground so the erosion doesn't destroy our buildings. So if we hit down the pipes far enough where they're solid ground and won't erode or have landslides, we can kind of use that as a way to support our buildings. And that is one of the ways that we do in architecture or engineering on how to support our buildings. Another little thing that I found out during the thing was, why am I blanking on the name? Pipe bracing method, which is kind of, we see this a lot in bridges and especially buildings where they start to cross or kind of align to point in our buildings, which is always really interesting. And a lot of people don't actually know why they do that. It's to strengthen and kind of take the weight in a way of bouncing it all between the things. And what people usually don't know is that that's very pointless underground. Because originally when I was doing this, I thought, hey, why don't we put that on the pillars? No, there's no point to that because the ground already does that. But there is a way that we can improve the ground supporting to prevent from, well, erosion and the pipes from getting ruined. And that is a thing called retaining walls. It's always really fun because I just recently learned about retaining walls because I forgot about this day. But retaining walls is something that could help stop erosion from happening. And it also compacts kind of the soil so it is in a little spot so our buildings are safer. Usually retaining walls are above the soil, but you can also put them up below the soil under our surface. This can actually benefit us a lot, and I don't know why we don't do that, but it's not something that's commonly done, and it's some way that we can actually improve our architecture quite a bit. So, yay, I did it right. So, underneath the soil, we want pipes and retaining walls, specifically those two. Something important to remember, though, is that you always have to have drainage. I'm also so sorry if this is spelled wrong, I'm dyslexic. But we have to have drainage, and drainage is always going to be a little different. One of the tests that I recently learned of that they do for engineering is that all that drainage has to withstand a 20-year storm, which means all that water that comes in that 20-year storm, that drainage has to be able to support it. So if you're on the coastline and it rains all the time like it is in Coos Bay, all that water has to be able to go through that drainage pipe. So in the retaining wall, you have to have a big enough pipe or drainage spot to be able to withstand that, to be able to support the building. Throughout the building, it's kind of important. However, above the surface, one way we can kind of improve our architecture, which I kind of have in like the little display here, it's confusing, is that we need to be able to raise our buildings up. So our foundations are usually really close to the ground, which does not make sense. And especially with king tides, because they come up and the coastal line makes us raise, what we can do is actually average out our king tides of the past few years, take those, average them out, take that average, put it a little bit higher than that average for our rising levels, and we would have ability, so if something goes a little bit higher than what it has in the average of the past few years, we would still be safe in our buildings and they wouldn't flood. Of course, we still have like flooding materials such as like seals and stuff like that. But having those basic little changes actually helps a lot. And it's confusing why we don't do that. But important changes to architecture just to help kind of prevent the damage from king tides. You guys have any questions? Good job. Anyone have a question?
So I like the idea of increasing the elevation of the buildings to above the king tide levels, but in terms of the the research that you've done and the stuff that you've looked into, how best would that extra elevation be supported? Because I know we'd be basically looking at above ground at that point, but are we dealing with basically pillars and columns? Or are we dealing with or what kind of structural devices would you look at using for those?
So one way that we could do this, we could use columns and stuff like that. But another way is we could do bases similar to, this is kind of my basic knowledge of Greece and how the architecture works over there, is a lot of their Colosseums. And then also their temples have bases of just like, it's mainly like sandstone, I believe. Could be wrong about that. Full sandstone, in our case, it would most likely be concrete or brick of some sort of material that's hard to weather, and put those entire things. And inside the bases, we would most likely do what I was talking about earlier of pipe bracing materials to just like make sure it was withstanding. If we don't do that, we would have the pipe bracing method in the round inside, and then have the materials around it to support the buildings, if that makes sense. Thank you. And give everybody one more round of applause. I want to say thank you again to all the students for all of your hard work and dedication, all the times you helped put up the planetarium and take it down and doing activities with the kids. So lots of hard work. Lots of, some of the students, when they have internships, they can count their hours towards some of that K-12 and community outreach, but there's many hours that they volunteer. And so thank you for doing that to kind of help keep things going. I know all the kids very much appreciate it. Next up basically is we have the summer. So everybody's, I'm sure, excited about that. We have our Summer STEAM Academy registration had to close today. We had quite a few students sign up for that. And then Trio, we're going to be helping them out with some of their kind of a STEM addition to their summer camps this summer. Trio is a really important program here at SWOCC and everywhere. After that, we've got some things coming up this fall with more lectures and all that, but we'll be announcing all of those things. If you follow Facebook, our SWOCC STEAM Pathways page is the most active. You can also check the calendar at soc.edu. Our lectures are recorded and kept on our YouTube channel. And again, thank you to everybody for all your support. Administration has been wonderful. Thank you, Allie, Patty, everyone, for continuous support with all the students and all the hard work that they do every day. I'm very proud of all of you for tonight and every day. So again, thank you to all of you and have a good night. Appreciate you all attending.